And we negotiated on one para, geopolitical para, for about 300 hours, non-stop. No sleeping, nothing, non-stop. Close to about 200 million people had gone below poverty line. No media was allowed. Any leakage of information would have led to the entire document getting leaked.
What Mr. Trump is doing has very large repercussions across the world in both climate and in trade. Therefore, all rules, regulations must be scrapped. We should allow free enterprise to grow. Government should only be a facilitator and catalyst. That should be our attempt. So there is a tariff war going on in the world. And this is totally disrupted supply chains.
Sir, we say that when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. This is a perfect example. This tourism posting was basically a punishment for you, so nothing was expected.
We will, in the next 3 years, go on to become the third largest economy, overtaking Japan and Germany.
If you do not accept it, my leader said we will walk out of G20.
National Geographic did a study and they termed Kerala as one of the 10 exotic paradises in the world.
Wow.
Now, to my mind, 6.5% is not adequate growth. India needs to grow at 8% plus for next 3 decades.
Mr. Kant, welcome to SparX. I've been waiting for this for a long period of time. I've been a huge fan of all your work, drawn a lot of inspiration for everything you've done. And I immensely enjoyed reading your book, How India Scaled Mount G20. Sir, we read about India's leadership for G20 in the headlines and all the leaders from the world come together and so on, something we get discussed, but we never get to see the behind the scenes, which is what you've explained in so much detail in this book. But before we get into that, can you just help us understand, first of all, why is G20 important? What was India's role as a leader in G20 and what are the key things we were able to accomplish during your and Prime Minister leadership?
G20 is the only body, multilateral body, which has all the global south countries. It has G7 countries. It has Russia, China. It has Australia, Saudi Arabia. It has Turkey, all of them together. So this is a group of 20 which comprises of about now close to 80% of global GDP. It comprises of about almost close to 84% of the global population. And it is now comprising about 80% of the global trade. Because now, during India's presidency, we got African Union included as a member.
Yeah.
So, African Union becoming a member has made it very inclusive. G20 is essentially a body which discusses issues of economy, of growth, of development, of climate, all critical issues. Normally, geopolitical issues are left to the United Nations or the Security Council. But as you are aware, the United Nations and the Security Council have been non-functional and dysfunctional after the Russia-Ukraine war. And therefore, a lot of these issues are also now getting discussed at the leaders' level in G20. So this is the only forum in the world where all leaders meet. All leaders meet. And because the leaders meet, it's a meeting point of all top leaders of the world. I was fortunate to be the Sherpa to the Prime Minister Modi. And my job as Sherpa was to take him on top of the Mount Everest, which is, in this context, means on top of Mount G20. And my job was to bring consensus amongst all Sherpas on all key issues. I was his and my leader person whose job was to bring consensus on all key issues confronting the world.
And sir, this was very difficult year also to have the presidency, right? The war has just started, there is a lot of trade disagreements which are brewing over a period of time, coming to a hit as we speak. Even last few weeks have been very tumultuous. So how was it to lead in that time? And I think, one of the big objectives you had was to really drive consensus, bring these 20 countries and 20 leaders together on a common cause agenda, which seemed almost impossible when India took the presidency.
It was a very, very challenging year because it was a post-COVID era. Close to about 200 million people had gone below poverty line. 100 million people had lost their jobs. Then you had a breakdown of global supply chains fully. Food, fuel, fertilizer in the world had been impacted. And you had a climate action, climate finance issue which was confronting. And on top of all this, there was a Russia-Ukraine war which had brought everything to a standstill. So these were complex issues, difficult issues. And India's job was to bring consensus amongst all these countries on a range of issues. On balanced, strong, sustainable growth, because growth is very important in the post-COVID era.
Right.
To accelerate the pace of sustainable development goals was very important because education, health, all had been badly impacted. Then we were pushing for reform of the multilateral institutions, and it was necessary. And the Security Council itself gets redesigned for today's world. And for us, digital public infrastructure and technological transformation was very important. And the other two key issues which India was driving was a green development pact amongst all the nations. And lastly, women-led development. All these 6 issues were very critical and very important for us, which we brought center stage. We were able to achieve consensus on all this. But the most important thing was that the Prime Minister wanted us to be ambitious. He wanted us to be inclusive. He wanted us to be action-oriented, and he wanted us to be decisive. Now, to be very ambitious and achieve all this and yet achieve consensus was a very challenging task, which we achieved. And at the end of it all, we achieved consensus on 88 paras and 112 outcomes. So when you compare this with other G20s, in the previous time in Indonesia, there was consensus only on about 40 odd issues. Before that, in Rome, on about 45 odd issues. But here we had taken it to a very high level of 112 outcomes.
Amazing. And sir, it was a huge matter of pride for, I guess, all of us Indians, because if you just go back 30 years ago, we were struggling to even be self-reliant, meet the basic needs and aspirations of people. And yet, here we are in 23, literally assuming leadership for the entire globe, 20 most economically developed, powerful countries in the world, and providing a very unique type of leadership, which is, not easy in such a multilateral forum. I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book, but especially chapter 5, because you take us, close to front. It's वैसे होता है ना कि बॉल बाय बॉल कमेंट्री कर रहे हैं आप कि पूरे 24 घंटे में, एंड वी फील कि स्टार्टअप पे हम लोग ज़्यादा काम करते हैं ऑल दैट, बट दिस इज ऑफ एफर्ट डिफरेंट लेवल ऑल टुगेदर. एंड I think people reading the book will learn that how diplomacy is done at the senior most level. But take us back to those 24 hours. What was going on, and it was this close to not happening, but somehow you kind of brought it all together.
So 2 issues. One is that the Prime Minister made us do the G20 very differently. Normally it is held in one city or 2 cities maximum. The Prime Minister said that you have the G20 in every state, every union territory. So we had about 230 odd meetings in all states and union territory. He made us convert G20 into a people's movement. तो ये एक साधारण व्यक्ति का एक कार्यक्रम बन गया था. हर स्कूल, हर कॉलेज, हर जगह जाना पड़ा था. दूसरा, पीएम का बड़ा क्लियर था कि आप कंसेंसस अचीव करिए. तो कंसेंसस 2 चीजों में बड़ा चैलेंज था. एक तो one was climate and the other was geopolitical balance. And it was important because we had failed in Bali and we failed all through the year. All ministerials, development ministerial, foreign minister, finance minister, all ministerials we had failed. And then we came to the last round, which is the Sherpa round. And important thing was that we took them out of Delhi. We took them about 75 kilometers out of Delhi. We did not allow anybody else to get in.
This was a group of Sherpas or?
Only group of Sherpas.
Okay.
No media was allowed. And when we started negotiating with 20 screens, no mobiles were allowed because any leakage of information would have led to the entire document getting leaked.
Yeah.
And we negotiated for one para, the geopolitical para, for about 300 hours, non-stop. No sleeping, nothing, non-stop. 300 hours. We did 250 bilaterals. And we failed 16 times. We could succeed only on the 17th time. And we could succeed because we had all the global south countries, Brazil, Africa, Indonesia, all with us. So the group of emerging markets worked together. The global south worked together. And in the 17th time, I just went and told them that this is the final draft. Because by that time, I knew everybody's red line. I said, this is the final draft. Take it or leave it.
And this was like at 1 a.m. or something in the night.
This was at about 1:30 in the night. The leaders had already arrived. Next day, 9 o'clock was the meeting. So at 1:30, I told them, this is the final draft. Take it or leave it. And if you do not accept this, my leader has asked me to tell you that we will rather work with, either BRIC or we'll work with IPSA, which is India, Brazil, South Africa. But all other countries also have a responsibility for the world. These are critical issues confronting the world. And if all of you do not have a consensus, then the whole document breaks down. So I said, if you do not accept it, my leader said, we will walk out of G20. So as soon as I finished this and I walked out of that room and I went to my room, the Russian deputy minister who was there and his Sherpa came to my room and they said that they want a line on getting the sanctions imposed by the West. That line to be included, that the sanctions must be removed. And I knew that G7 will never accept it. So I said, that's a red line for G7. They will never accept it. This discussion went on for about an hour. And finally, I had to tell them that if you do not agree, then the next speaker after our Prime Minister will be Zelensky. We will virtually get him to speak because there was a lot of pressure on us from G7. He had warded off that pressure. The minute I said that, they said they will then go back and discuss with their leaders, and they came back after 15 minutes accepting what we had said. So we got Russia's acceptance. By about 4 o'clock, I had the acceptance of France, Germany, Italy, all these countries, including Japan. But I did not have the consent of United States of America. In the morning, the Prime Minister came to Bharat Mandapam and he asked me. And I said, sir, it is still being negotiated at 8 o'clock. He said, how much more time? I said, sir, it will take some time. There's this problem. I've yet to get the consent. And I started telling him the challenge. He did not want to get into the procedures. He said, you ensure that there is a consent. He said, don't involve me in the process, but you ensure that there is a consensus. So I went and talked to the American Sherpa at about 8:20, and he said that he is still to discuss with President Biden, and he will get back to me in 10 minutes. He got back to me immediately, and he said that there are two issues. One is that they wanted a change of one word. And that shows that every word, every letter matters in international negotiation. And he said they want a consent of Russia and China before it. So Russia consent I got at 2 a.m. in the night, but China's consent I did not have. So I phoned up the Chinese Sherpa. The Chinese Sherpa told me that everything is fine with them because all emerging markets are together, but they want one line removed. And that line was that America will host G20 in 2026. That was important for Mr. Biden, who was to fight the election. So I said, but everyone else has agreed to that. You have also agreed earlier. So he says, no, my Prime Minister doesn't agree to this because the Americans don't issue us visas. The Hong Kong governor, etc., will never get visas. And so I went back to the Americans. The Americans said, nothing doing. And we were in a deadlock. And then the Leaders Summit started at 9 o'clock. And from 9:15 to 12:30, I had to negotiate with the Americans and the Chinese. And after, at about 12:30, the Chinese wanted a written legal guarantee that all of the Chinese names which they give will get a visa. Finally, I had to tell them that I speak better English. The word ensure is enough. And finally, a letter was issued by America that we'll ensure that visas are issued. And we clinched it at about 1 o'clock. the Prime Minister announced after lunch at 1:30 that consensus has been arrived at, and that the declaration was approved to a thunderous applause by all the leaders. So that's how we achieved consensus. It was touch and go, but it was very, very tough negotiations. Very, very ruthless, very brutal negotiations.
That's incredible. And sir, in light of, it seems like there's a lot of pressure on the world becoming, polarized again. In that backdrop, just as recently, just, a couple of years ago, to be able to bring pretty much whole of the world, as you say, 85% of the world GDP and population, and agree on a much broader draft, across variety of issues. It's a significant accomplishment, and hopefully also it's a bit of a legacy that, in subsequent version of G20 will hopefully continue to develop that. So, sir, Abhi, the last few weeks, all the news that's coming out now, the tariff announced recently and so on, seems like, what G20 is trying to do to bring the world together. But there's so many forces at play. The war is still going on. China is, continue to, in some ways, disconnect from the world. India is one country, where we are really trying to work with everyone and trying to bring people together. But what does it mean for the geopolitics of the world in the coming years?
Okay, there are three key challenges to my mind. One is that there is a conflict in the heart of Europe, Russia-Ukraine war. Secondly, there is a complete breakdown of global supply chains. You've seen earlier 100% duty being imposed by America on Chinese automobiles, on batteries. Europe has imposed 45% duties. Now Mr. Trump has come and yesterday put 25% duty on Canada and Mexico and 10% again on China. And you are seeing that China is also retaliating. Canada is retaliating. So there is a tariff war going on in the world. And this has totally disrupted supply chain. The World Tourism Organization dispute settlement mechanism is not working, and there's a breakdown total. And the third, to my mind, is that there is emergence of new technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, which will have a huge impact on production and productivity across the world. But the basic algorithm and assumptions on which it is based, if it requires some international regulation. If there's no international regulation, it can trigger conflict among such societies. Now, it's also important to say that globalization has lifted vast segments of people above poverty line. It allows free trade to take place. But free trade should also take place in a manner that we are able to uplift the people at the bottom to improve in education, health, and many other areas. And now, what Mr. Trump is doing has very large repercussions across the world in both climate and in trade. His philosophy is that he will make America great again. And by taking some action, he's pushing for growth. We'll have to see whether it has adverse impact, but it will definitely have an adverse impact on the rest of the world. And therefore, India is not impacted as yet. And the good thing that has happened is that the new budget has been very bold, very decisive, and it has pushed for startups, it has pushed for deep tech, it has pushed for clean tech. Some of these areas will enable India to get into a high trajectory growth of 8 to 9% over a long period of time. Now, the Prime Minister's vision is that we should have Viksit Bharat, and this should drive us towards that ambition of a Viksit Bharat.
See, last few years, we have also seen a lot of acknowledgement and praise for India's diplomacy, because it's a very complicated world now. Yeah. But somehow we are able to manage a relationship with Russia. Yeah. We are good presence in Middle East, very strong relationship with US. We still have very strong trade relationship with China. Is very complicated, but still very important in some ways for both countries. So do you think this geopolitics of the world has also forced us to raise our bar on diplomacy?
Yeah. So 3-4 things. One is that we have grown rapidly. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. We will, in the next 3 years, go on to become the 3rd largest economy, overtaking Japan and Germany. So if you have the strength of economic power, number 2 is that you have the stature of the Prime Minister. He has interacted with all global leaders across the world. He's participated in many multilateral and regional groupings. And his stature adds huge value, as I saw during G20. And third is that there is a domestic size and scale of India. The big scale of India. And if when we work together as a team like we did in digital public infrastructure, we make a difference to the world. And therefore, these three factors of democracy, demand, etc., all make a difference. Now, what during the COVID period we did was to work with all countries. We bought Russian oil. If we hadn't done that, our population would have suffered. We processed it and sold it to Europe, which benefited from it, because if we had not done that, Europe would have also suffered very badly. And therefore, we've been able to work with all countries. And our attempt has been, we have a difficult neighborhood in China, but despite that, we have tried our best to work very closely. And recent measures, as you say, our attempt has been to work closely and sort out all our border disputes with China so that we can move forward on many other areas. Now, we are in a globalized world and we need to export. We need to bring in the best technologies. We need foreign direct investment. We need to accelerate the pace of growth. And therefore, India believes that an open economy is good for India.
Right. Sir, I want to share something with you. In 2007, I moved back to India from US. And I was away from India for 10 years. So I want to learn more about India, कि पिछले 10 साल में क्या हुआ है. And I was looking for various books on India and so on. And I came across your books, Branding India. So I picked it out of curiosity. And sir, उस वक्त तक जनरली इंप्रेशन होता है कि गवर्नमेंट में धीरे धीरे काम होता है, सेम तरह से काम होता है, फाइल धीरे धीरे मूव होती है and all of that. And I read your book, Branding India, and the language was so relatable. It was like, startup mindset, disrupt things, new thinking, everything that you describe in the book about initially rebranding Kerala as a God's own country. I had no idea, but I had heard the phrase because that phrase has traveled so far. And I thought probably that's how Kerala has, branded itself all the time. I didn't realize it was a marketing campaign that you championed and later on you take it to national level with Incredible India, both immensely successful. So take us back to those days. How did it come about? Because, we don't expect, from bureaucrats to have this, these branding campaigns and completely reposition, entire state first in the entire country.
So, I had, actually, I was in a big problem. I was earlier a collector in a place called Calicut, which was where Vasco da Gama had landed and had broken a lot of encroachments, widened roads, made a bypass, 450 buildings were broken down. And I had not anticipated, but one of the persons whose four-star hotel had broken went on to become the deputy chief minister. And I got into a major problem. They initiated an inquiry. I got into problems. I was without a posting for about 10 months.
How old were you, sir, at that time?
I was very young. I was about close to about 29, 30 that time.
So were you worried about your career?
I was very worried and I thought this is the end of my career and I should resign. And then, as a punishment posting, the Marxist government, then it was a Marxist government, as a punishment posting, they posted me as Secretary Tourism. Now, nobody wanted to go as Secretary Tourism. Nobody had heard of Kerala as a tourism destination. Everybody wanted to travel to either Rajasthan or to Kashmir. Kerala was unheard of. And I used that opportunity to build Kerala. And I created new products in Kerala. The backwaters of Kerala was unheard of, and we created that as a unique product. The houseboats of Kerala, because, these are the traditional rice boats, not a single nail is used. Carpenters had gone away to Gulf, we brought them back. Then we went back to the roots of Kerala. We restored the traditional Kerala Nalkittam houses, which have a beautiful courtyard. They were all being sold as firewood. So we brought them back, and then we brought back Kerala's traditional martial art, Kalripet, and we brought back Kerala's traditional culture, Kathakali, Mohiniyattam, Tayyam, all this. And we brought back the traditional Kerala cuisine, appam and stew and the traditional cuisine. So we went back to the roots, the civilization, the strengths of Kerala and differentiated Kerala from the rest of the world. And we said that this product is very different from the rest of the world. And we branded it as God's own country. But we said that Kerala will be a product of private enterprise. All resorts, every business activity will be done by the private sector. Government will act as a catalyst. Government will provide the last mile. So we provided jetties, we provided last mile roads, we cleaned up the backwaters, we did the branding, but the business part of it was all done by the private sector, and Kerala is a great product of private-public enterprise. And then, National Geographic did a study, and they termed Kerala as one of the 10 exotic paradises in the world.
Wow.
They said it's unique not because of its tourism alone, but when you combine the beauty of backwaters, hills, wildlife, also beaches, they are all available within 3 hours of each other. But Kerala has these unique products with a very high physical quality of life index, 100% literacy, very advanced health standards, all this with tourism, and that's why they termed it as an exotic paradise.
Sir, you bolte hain that when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. This is a perfect example. This tourism posting was basically a punishment for you, so nothing was expected.
No, it was using crisis as an opportunity, and it was that every challenge you can convert into an opportunity. And then, what happened was that one day I was sleeping at home. I got a call from the Prime Minister's office that the Principal Secretary wanted to speak to me. And I was a very junior officer. So Mr. Brijesh Mishra came in the line. And he said that the Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, will be going to Kerala for a week, for a holiday. He will not have any political interaction, and he will not meet politicians. You will be the host, and you decide where he will go, and you make all the arrangements. So I decided on Kumaragam, and that's how Kumaragam came up as a destination. He stayed in Kumaragam, and for 1 week we brought the best of Kerala culture, the best of Kerala Ayurveda, the best of Kerala cuisine for him. And Kerala became known all over the world. And then I was the only person available there all the time. So one day, Mr. Mishra told Mr. Vajpayee that इस लड़के ने बहुत काम किया है, इसको भारत सरकार में लाना है. And, so Mr. Vajpayee turned to me and he said, have you applied for Government of India? आपने apply किया? तो I said, नहीं sir, मैंने तो नहीं apply किया है. तो he said, नहीं अच्छा है, मत apply करिए. अगर आप apply करिएगा तो ब्रजेश मिश्रा जी आपको tourism के बदले women and child welfare में भेज देंगे. So that was, everybody laughed, that was the end of the story. I applied 1 year, 3 months later. I was to go to Finance Ministry, but when the file went to Prime Minister, he changed it to tourism. And that's how I reached tourism. As soon as I landed in Government of India, the Twin Tower blast happened in New York. Right. There was attack on our parliament. There was war in Afghanistan. There were travel advisories against India, and tourism slumped. It was just 10%. We had very few hotels, but the occupancy was only 10%. And we wanted to promote and market India, but everybody said that tourists will not come under these circumstances. Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, all had stopped their marketing campaign. And at the peak of that crisis, we launched the Incredible India campaign.
How did the line, sir, came up? Like Incredible India, it's a just 2-word phrase, but so powerful.
Yeah.
Kaise uska?
It was all developed in-house by us in the ministry, but the creative interpretation of that was done by Ogilvy and Mather, and there was a very creative person, Piyush Pandey worked on it. There was a very creative person called V. Sunil. So I am a great believer that you need to work in government with the best people outside. And I've always worked with the best persons. I've never worked on the lowest cost. I believe in working on quality come cost. So quality must, these are very, very important creative marketing campaigns. So you need to see that the quality gets a very high 80% mark. I've worked with Piyush Pandey and later I have, I've worked with some of the best creative people, and so at the peak of that campaign, we launched it and we brought back tourism to India. It was a 360-degree campaign, and we were able to make a huge impact. And it was a marketing-led strategy which led to a demand growth, and that demand growth then led to creation. The tourism grew, and then it led to the creation of new airports, new airlines. Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, all these new airports came up because demand was growing for tourism in India.
We have come a long way since then. It's been about nearly 25 years since those times, but tourism employs large number of people. It's one of the largest employer in the country, and the numbers are just going through the roof year after year. So it must be very fulfilling to see. Like, I think India, I don't think was...
I'm glad that Finance Minister in this new budget has announced several measures for tourism, and I think that should give it a push.
Right. And sir, after that, at some point, when you took on your role as Niti Aayog, I think from early on, you embraced startups very strongly. I remember, so like, again, going back to a little bit of my story, is 2007, 2012, I was trying to build Myntra, but things were really not going anywhere. It was very difficult to get anything done, any permissions and so on. And around, 2013-14 time frame, started to see like there's outreach from government, and then eventually the Startup India initiative, which I think recruited thousands of startups and created a whole ecosystem, which, everyone knows the results since then. So how did that, embracing of startups as a key enabler for India development path, come in the picture?
Yeah. So, I was secretary when this government came in. I was secretary, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion. And we first did the Make in India because it was important to bring ease of doing business. So we removed a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork. 1,700 laws were removed. All that we did to bring ease of doing business. Then we improved on the patent and trademark regime, and we opened up the foreign direct investment regime. So as a part of that, I felt that we needed to encourage startups. There were several challenges because the same regulatory mechanism applied on startups. They had to get all the clearances and all. So we went to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister advised us to work and do a separate initiative on startup. So we brought all the tinkering labs, the Atal Innovation Mission. We brought all the incubators, biotechnology, science and technology. It was a whole of government approach. And we said we'll remove all clearances from startups. And then we said that there will be a fund for 10,000 crores. So all this, we linked it all together. It was a 360-degree approach. We had only about 256 startups at that time. Today, we have 150,000 startups. We have over 150 unicorns. That whole of government approach of tinkering labs, of incubation centers, many, many things together enabled us to really push and drive the Startup India movement. And that's how, you have been a big driver yourself, and you have been a role mentor, and you put in your risk capital in many enterprises. So the fund of funds helped us because that took 1/3 of the risk, and 2/3 came from venture capital funds. And I think this year again, the finance minister has replenished it with another 10,000 crores. Now we need to put in money for the deep tech movement, another 10,000 crores. So all this will help us to drive the startup movement in a very big way.
Yeah, and I remember, I think it was probably 2016 when you organized the Startup India Conclave with, the then operating startups came together in a lot of working groups, and Prime Minister came and interacted with a lot of us, which was huge boost and, motivator, because, you have Prime Minister of the country interacting with the young and fledgling startups and encouraging them, and backed by very strong programs to create this.
Yeah, the Prime Minister interacted with about 3,000 young people, but only the startups sat with him. Everyone else was sitting separately. All of us, the ministers, everybody sat down. Only the startups were sitting with the Prime Minister. So it was a very inspirational moment, I thought.
And culmination of that is not only 150 unicorns, which are very well celebrated, but we finally have big exit path opened up. Last year many startups went IPO. This year a lot who are lined up. So investors are able to see full cycle. They're not only investing, but they're able to get meaningful returns.
No, that's very important. The exit is very, very important. IPOs are very, very important for startups because they should be able to do new initiatives. They should be able to attract risk capital. They should then be able to exit finally and make money out of it.
So, sir, you mentioned this deep tech fund of funds now, and which is, I think, where we are at. It's very critical to continue to participate in the global economy, with both the opportunity and the threat of AI on the horizon. And we have some bit of catch up to do, like same for semiconductor and so on. So what has been your experience last few years in watching, various initiatives within the government, and your recommendation for both to entrepreneurs and government in the coming years so that India can replicate same success from G20 and the startup ecosystem and digital public infrastructure in the deep tech ecosystem as well?
No, so I've been a great believer that India has to really drive the deep tech area because, we are a major importer of solar energy components. We are a major importer of electric vehicle components. Battery storage, we are a major importer. Wind energy, we are a major importer. Now, all these areas, technology is getting disrupted. And we need to move very fast in these deep tech areas. Now, deep tech areas require patient capital. You get returns after a long period of time. And therefore, the government needs to assist and support. Through risk capital. India's not merely the fund of funds, but I think India's insurance companies, India's pension funds, India's family houses, people like you, as you are investing, you've invested in Skyroot, which is a space company. Many others must invest in these areas of growth so that we are able to take a technological leap forward. Now, the government's intent is very clear. It has opened up the geospatial sector. It has opened up the space sector. It has opened up the drone sector. All these areas have been opened up. Now, we need more entrepreneurs. We need more risk capital to come in to drive entrepreneurship in all these areas. And we in government will be very happy to act as facilitators to drive this.
And sir, this vision of Viksit Bharat that Prime Minister articulated very clearly and strongly, and I think there is a sense of belief in the country at large that we really mean it, and we can aspire to something which was, I think, maybe unimaginable just a decade or two ago. So, what are your thoughts on what are the opportunities? How believable is that, and what are some of the challenges also? Because it's probably not going to be smooth road for us to get there.
The Prime Minister set a very challenging task for the country. We are a $4 trillion economy. We have to reach 30 trillion. So, आपको 4 trillion से 30 trillion पे जाना है. That means that your GDP has to grow 9 times, your per capita income has to grow 8 times, your manufacturing has to grow 16 times. That is the challenge for India. Now, very few countries in the past have done this. Japan did this post-World War II. Korea has done it. China has done it in recent times. All other countries have got caught in the middle income trap. And that means they have not grown rapidly at high rates. Now, to my mind, 6.5% is not adequate growth. India needs to grow at 8% plus for next 3 decades. Next 3 decades. And growing that means year after year, year after year, year after year. And that means we have to carry out reforms year after year. We have to be an integral part of the global supply chain. We have to become a manufacturer to export. All this is very, very important. All this is very critical. And that is what India needs to do. This would require us to put in a lot of money for research and development. This would require us to do reforms in patents. This would require us to work on free enterprise. India cannot grow without the private sector. And India cannot grow without its startup movement. And therefore, all rules, regulations must be scrapped. We should allow free enterprise to grow. Government should only be a facilitator and catalyst. That should be our attempt.
do we need our own Department of Government Efficiency equivalent?
No, so the budget has already announced this, that there will be a committee which will scrap rules, regulations. A lot of that, it is given its 1 year time. I don't think 1 year is required. I think we should start the work as of tomorrow. Ask every government department to scrap rules. A lot of unnecessary rules and regulation from the socialist era exist. Also, I think the labor laws need to be implemented quickly, which has been passed by the parliament, and that will enable us to leapfrog in many areas of growth.
Sir, in one of your talks yesterday, you talked about in Niti Aayog and in various initiatives you're involved in. You hired lots of youngsters, a lot of people in their 20s, which is again very different. Government, you join in your 20s, you slowly one promotion at a time, karte in your 50s, you reach at a point of where you have some power and able to do things. But you have again, bucked the trend and driven things very differently. So just talk to us about that. What was the thought process behind that, and how can we, the most of government of India can do more of that?
So my experience is that I started in West India with a lot of young people. Then when I came to Niti Aayog, actually I brought in about 1,000 young professionals. They brought a different energy, vitality, dynamism. They were thinking ahead of time. So I said, plan out what every department will do 15 years, 10 years ahead, what they need to do, because departments are caught in day-to-day work. You think ahead of time. And that's what these people did. They did path-breaking work for every ministry, looking ahead. And secondly, I think, to my mind, young people are very, they have a disruptionist mindset. They want to take India forward. So I benefited greatly. They gave me a lot of energy. They provided me a lot of thought process. They provided me a disruptionist mindset. And I think their thinking is very different from established government officers who just keep working on pushing files. So I have been a great believer in young people, and I've been a great believer that young people will make a lot of difference to the government, and they bring a tremendous amount of efficiency.
And today's young people have a shot that by the time they get to their middle years, they're probably part of a developed country, very different lifestyle that, we growing up.
So, if India has to be a $30 trillion economy, you have to empower your young citizens. We are a country with very different demography. Why I'm saying this is that IMF has said that 2/3 of the growth will come from the global south. It'll come from global south because the population in West, in Europe, in Japan is all aging.
Yeah.
Whereas the population is young in Asia, in India, particularly India.
Yeah.
And we have to create wealth. Rarely has a country not created wealth when its population is young. We have to transform the lives of our citizens. That's what the Prime Minister's vision is.
Right. Sir, speaking of Prime Minister, I think last chapter of your book is also what I learned working with the Prime Minister. And see, we are from the outside, we hear stories about his work ethic, commitment to health, and attention to detail, patient listener. But, you've worked very closely with him in variety of initiatives. So can you just summarize, your key learnings, that have helped you develop as a...
So I worked with him when I was CEO Niti Aayog. Before that, I worked when I was in secretary, and I made the maximum number of presentations to him. And I then worked as a Sherpa. So first of all, he's a man with a vision. Very few leaders have that big picture of where to... He set a vision that we want to take India to a developed economy by 2047. So vision is important. Secondly, I saw that both in Niti Aayog and in G20, he's willing to be very bold and take risks. So I could take many bold decisions. I could be risky because he was the Prime Minister. The third critical thing to my mind is that even when there are challenges, there are difficulties, like I faced when I was negotiating G20, while I was sending him situation reports, he always was optimistic. He never gets into, he delegates to you, he wants reporting, but he's optimistic always. So optimism is very important. The fourth thing, I really think that he's a person who believes in teamwork. And G20 is a great example of cooperative federalism. So he believes in teamwork. He's a believer in cooperative and competitive federalism. And I would say that the last thing which I learned to a great extent is that whatever you do, however hard work you put in, you must keep some time for exercise, meditation, yoga. So I try and practice that even when we were negotiating non-stop, at least for half an hour to 45 minutes. I put in about an hour and a half of work, physical exercise. But even during difficult times, I was taking time out to do some yoga. And that I will advise every single young person to do. However hard it must be, however much you have to work, however much you have to study, take out 1 hour for yourself and exercise. You must exercise, get into physical, tough exercise, because that will keep you going and that will ensure that you never have any kind of mental problem on a later date.
And I think you were sharing with me the other day that you have pretty rigorous workout regime.
Yeah.
You go all out when you're working out.
So I don't like to work on machines. I like to work on my own body. It's a functional exercise. I do some run and then I do a lot of exercises around my body. And I feel that working on your own body gives you greater strength and greater energy. It makes you must sweat it out. All that I'm telling the young people is that there is nothing will give you more pleasure than making your sweat come out.
Yeah, and that gives you a lot of stamina and longevity, sir. I think it's been nearly 50 years since you have, doing a lot of efforts for the country, and contributing in a very significant manner. And every time I see you, you have more energy than before, really no sign of slowing down or aging. You're like always raring to go and able to drive this, which is some...
So I think that energy actually comes out from constant reading. You must read. You should have some interest in some sport. I do. I mean, I play games and I also do exercise. And you should have some interest, whether it's reading or gardening or photography, whatever. I also have interest in art and culture. So I think that's what every young Indian must do. And every young Indian, whatever you do, must exercise.
And so that is also reminding me, studying your work and knowing you, there's a genuine love for the country. You have gone out of your way to really embrace the culture of different parts of the country, sports, people. You've really tried to understand the country, which I think has helped you take, champion certain initiatives and drive things certain way and communicate in a way that people are able to relate.
So, what helped me was, the Prime Minister once said that let's look at the backward district. 115 of the most backward district. He didn't call them backward, he called them the aspirational district. So I have traveled to 115 of the most backward districts, met the collectors, met the people, interacted with all of them, very far-flung districts. And we were able to transform them based on data, good governance, constant monitoring, putting out that data in public domain on how they were performing, naming and shaming them. So we created a sense of competition and we put young collectors on PM's direction. We put young collectors in these districts. We filled up the positions of all doctors, teachers. We transformed these 115 districts. And that, to my mind, enabled me to learn a lot about India. I traveled extensively to urban areas and cities, but this travel to all the interior parts of India really made me a better human being.
So has there any part of your career where you have not worked hard?
No, see, I believe in slogging it out. I believe in working hard. Recently, there was this controversy of what Mr. Narayan Murthy and Mr. Subramaniam had said. But I believe in working hard. I really believe that we are at a stage of our growth where we must work hard. And we must work hard to achieve outcomes. And what Mr. Subramaniam was saying is that you work hard to deliver projects ahead of time to his team. Yeah. And I believe in working hard to achieve outcomes. And I believe that while you're working hard, you should also do exercise. You should keep ensuring that it'll give you greater satisfaction. And India needs to work hard so that we don't ever get it. Japan worked hard. Yeah. China's worked hard. Singapore worked hard. They were very tough leaders.
Right.
One of the books I was reading was this book on the Asia century. I mean, Singapore worked very hard when it was poor.
Right.
They took the per capita income from $500 to $90,000. $500 to $90,000. So imagine how much of hard work they put in.
And there is a sense of urgency because we have massive demographic dividend today, but it's not going to last forever. We have this 30, 40 year window.
Next 6 to 7 years, we have to transform India.
What are some of your aspirations for India next 6, 7 years? What would you like to see happen?
So, 3 things. One is that first and foremost, we have to do much better in learning outcomes, in health outcomes, in nutrition standards. Every state must focus on education, improving learning outcomes, health outcomes, and nutritional standards. Without that, it will not be possible to grow. That's my belief. Secondly, we have to bring in new technology in agriculture. Do better value-added processing, bring in cutting-edge technology, enhance agriculture productivity. And we have too much dependency of population on agriculture. 46% of people on agriculture is too high. So you need to take them out and put them into urbanization and manufacturing. And we have to do better sustainable urbanization.
Right.
Urbanization will be the very big driver of growth in the coming years, and we have to do good, sound, sustainable urbanization. And the last thing is to do very good manufacturing, size and scale of manufacturing, which will enable us to export to the rest of the world.
It'll be great to see all this happen in the coming years, sir. My last question to you is about your books. You have written 6 books. I don't know if there are more in the works or not, but you're not only you have contributed through your work, but you also inspired a lot of people through your writing and shared your learnings and experiences. How are you able to find time for writing these books amidst all the things that you've been very deeply involved in?
So I jot down points every day, and I read a lot, and then whatever good things that I figure out, I put them down in a diary, and I do this by hand.
Okay.
And so that there's a better recall value and all that. And then when I conceptualize, I think through, I break it into titles, and then I try and, when I start writing, I write every day. But a lot of thinking process goes into that.
Right.
You have to think through on what you have to write. You have to have the clarity of mind to be able to write. And clarity of mind is very, very critical when you're writing, and you should have thought it through. And that requires a very in-depth thinking, because if there's lack of clarity, then you write garbage. So that I'm very clear about what I want to write about. And most of what I write about is based on my learning and my experiences and my own, what I think should be the right strategy for growth.
And you mentioned you read a lot. Is there something you will also recommend a lot of youngsters to find time for reading? Because reading in some ways, seems to be on the decline because we're all busy with the phone.
I read a lot because I really think it gives you strength. And the two top-class books which I've read in recent times, and one is William Dalrymple's new book, The Golden Road, which really talks about what a great power India was, but it's a very well-researched book, which I'll advise every young Indian to read. And secondly, I was reading this new book, The Chips War, by Chris Miller, a professor in the United States. And that book is remarkable because it brings out how chips will dominate, everything from mobile to drones to aeroplanes to automobiles, and how chips will be the most critical feature of our lives. And therefore, achieving some kind of self-autonomy on chips will be very critical for India. And that's why this semiconductor mission. And I really think that some of these new missions that government has put out, the AI mission, the quantum computing mission, the semiconductor mission, and also the production-linked incentive scheme, and now the clean tech mission, all these will be very, very critical for India to achieve success and grow at rapid pace in the coming years.
And sir, maybe I'll be remiss, I said last question, but one more just about this AI. Last 1 year, it seems that the world cannot stop talking about AI. This is getting into hyperdrive. what are your expectations and anticipation from this, coming AI revolution?
So we are at the beginning of the AI race, and the race is wide open. What DeepSeek has demonstrated is that you need very powerful algorithms. The software component is as critical as the hardware. And they've demonstrated that you could achieve very amazing results as a consequence of good convergence between software and hardware. They could achieve it without having the most advanced computing power. And we need to provide great computing power to our research institutions, to our citizens, to our people who are researching in AI. But you will need data and you will need great software. And this convergence and mix between innovation of software and hardware will be critical. But data is what India will have. You have 425,000 engineers, which no other country has. You have the power of data. You have a very thriving software. You have the biggest number of AI experts in India. And I think the race is open. And in the coming years, India must lay down the foundational layers. Application layer alone will not suffice. We should do end-to-end AI, and we should do it for every single sector, education, health, where we'll make a difference to the lives of Indians.
Yeah, I think now the AI agenda needs to be coupled with the Viksit Bharat agenda. It's with that critical.
Yeah.
But sir, I want to take time to thank you for coming and speaking to us. You've been a great role model and mentor. I think you've inspired people both through your writings and through your work, and it's outstanding that you continue to find ways to keep contributing to at higher and higher level. Hopefully there are more initiatives on the way and more writing on the way. We'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
At SparX, we aim to bring to you stories of exponential impact. We share in-depth analysis of what goes behind success stories. If you find our conversations interesting, you can join us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to SparX on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or any other audio platform of your choice. If you have any suggestions on who we should invite or what topics we need to cover, just let us know in the comments. We are always listening, looking for ways to improve, and keep getting better as we go along.